Why do you believe what you believe? Because at some point in your life, you trusted the information that somebody was giving you. And that someone you trusted told you that a car was a car, a tree was a tree, a bird was a bird, the blue stuff above you is the sky. And that's the way that we began to determine what we believe to be a fact. Most of the things that we believe to be a fact in our lives are told to us through our stories or the news that we hear. So my question would be, if they were deceiving you with the stories they tell you, would you be able to recognize that?
So we've all heard the term conspiracy theory. Personally, for me, I've never really had time to get into any of that because, frankly, I'm working all the time and I don't have the time to look into Bigfoot or aliens or flat Earth or 9/11 conspiracy or the JFK assassination. It's just, it's not anything that I really have any backstory on. But the one thing that I do have a lot of backstory on, the one thing I do know a lot about is Hollywood.
When you think about the entertainment industry, what comes to mind? Movies, TV, music, right? Let's talk about this entertainment.
I've been observing you.
What if this entertainment was more than just entertainment?
Now in complete control!
When you're driving home from work, what are you listening to? When you come home after a long day and turn on the TV, what do you see?
The U.S. are bracing.
Saying that they're one.
Think about all the content you've seen throughout your whole life. A lot of it has actually made us who we are today.
So you don't know what's really going on.
Have you ever stopped for just a second, though, and questioned the content?
Good morning, Vietnam!
The only thing we consume more than content is air. But we actually think about the quality of the air we breathe. Maybe it's time to take a closer look at our content.
And fear. Access.
Our government's always controlled our content.
The fight for freedom.
We've just never paid attention.
Freedom of speech.
Message received.
The police occupy our community.
To work with the CIA to destabilize foreign countries.
This media that we're consuming at such a rapid rate, we need to slow down and think about what we're consuming.
Bullshit going on.
What if the people in charge didn't have our best interests in mind? Now we have to ask ourselves, who's influencing our content?
Is the CIA involved in Hollywood?
Yes.
Guys, come ahead. Troy, have a steady everybody.
That's good right there. It's picking up speed. Go, go, go. Go, go, go. Go, go, go.
So for the past 28 years, I've probably had one of the coolest jobs in the world. I was a professional stunt performer. I've worked with some of the biggest stars. I've got to be Batman. I've got to be James Bond. I've won World Stunt Awards. I am in the Screen Actors Guild. I'm in the DGA. I'm in the WGA. And last year, I got into the Academy, the Oscars. I worked my way up from being a stuntman to being a fight coordinator, to being a stunt coordinator, to being a second unit director. First big job I get, I'm on Batman Forever. And I'm walking around set and I'm pinching myself. I'm looking over, there's Tommy Lee Jones, there's Jim Carrey, there's Val Kilmer, there's Drew Barrymore, there's Nicole Kidman. And I'm like, how did I get here? say I'm gonna go be a stuntman. I wanted to go make movies. But being a stuntman was the easiest way for me to get into the business. I didn't want to be an actor because pretending to be a character. Well, being a stuntman, I was that character. I was the guy behind the illusion, creating it for the guy who's on the screen. I jumped out of that helicopter. I was in that fireball. I did whatever was being asked of the job. I've had an amazing career, and I've had an amazing life.
That's a cut.
But in the system that exists today, as I get up the ladder, I realize it's not what people think it is. It's an illusion. It is a complete illusion. In 2014, I was working on a television show up in Portland, and I had a catastrophic injury. I've done this stunt probably variations of it 20 times over my career. It was nothing. It was a small fall down into a stairwell. I did the first take fine, the second take, I knew I could do it better. I went up and I fell over the rail and I landed on the pipe down below, and I burst fractured my L2 vertebrae and I was paralyzed from the waist down. When you are injured, when you are catastrophically injured and it changes who you are, I knew from that day I would never be the athlete that I once was. And I always told people as a stuntman, the worst possible injury you can get is a lower back injury. You can break your legs, your arms, whatever, but if you injure your lower back or your hips, your pelvic region, you're done. There was 2 years that I didn't think I would ever live without pain. One of the issues I was dealing with at that time was I had lost the feeling, and I still have numbness in my thighs and on this half of my pelvic region. I was going to physical therapy, and the lady looks at me and she goes, "This isn't really helping you. You're way more advanced than this stuff." And I go, "Yeah, I do this every morning." She goes, "Well, what's the real issue?" I said, "The real issue is my pelvic region." And so she said, "Okay, well, there's a woman who works here, and she is a pelvic floor therapist."
So, how I met Mike, I met him, his spine was broken and he had partial paralyzation of his pelvic floor area. We help people when they have problems with the most important functions in your life: bowel, bladder, and sexual function.
So one day we're in the middle of therapy and she stops me and she says, "Mike, I feel like you have really dark spirits over you. Can I pray for you?" And I was like, "Pray for me?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, pray for me. I don't really believe in that stuff anymore, but yeah, go ahead, pray for me." So she prays for me. And I was kind of thinking while she's doing it, okay, this is weird, but okay, whatever. So for the next 2 or 3 months, I would go, and then every now and then she would stop me and she'd say, "Hey, can I pray over you?"
I was kind of a little bit disgusted with his personality because he was all about himself and money, and I think the Lord had a lot of work to do in terms of humility with him. He made it very clear that he thought I was crazy, but he let me.
After she stopped one day, and I said, "You are either 100% batshit crazy, or you think all this is real in the spirit world." And she looked at me and she said, "Michael, I am one of the only pelvic floor therapists in Southern California at the time. And when these satanic people and these evil people do their rituals to little girls and women and boys, who do you think puts them back together? I do. It's completely real, and you need to look into it." My awakening, it didn't happen at church the way that some people find God. I just pretty much had given up my faith, and I'd given up where I was at, and I was just kind of at the point where I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna have the best time I can here, and when I die, that's it. I still wasn't sure if it wasn't 100% crazy or not, but I was reading these articles and looking at these things, and I was like, I've seen things at parties. I've seen artwork. I've seen statues. I've seen things in some people's houses that just seem to be mimicking occult stuff I'm reading about. So I was like, maybe there is something to this. I'm just going to say this. I didn't find God because I went to church. I found God because I realized that the Luciferian and the other side, the occult world, was real, and that I had been fooled for all these years, and I then got really scared. I got really scared because this was the first time in my life that I was having to question my own reality. Physically, I was crushed. I wasn't going to be who I was. And spiritually, I mean, if I'm being honest, I didn't know anything about being a Christian. I mean, really. And then professionally, everything that I knew about my career, I was starting to look at in a different way. I was starting to question my career in Hollywood from a different perspective. So I got off of social media and I made an anonymous account. I started reading blogs, looking at articles. I started reading books. I started watching videos online. I just started searching for the truth, and I was finding accounts that were searching for the truth themselves. They weren't mainstream accounts. These were accounts online that I felt like were like me. They were just looking for what the truth was. I didn't believe I was getting the truth from CNN, MSNBC, Fox. I didn't believe any of them. I just wanted to read it, absorb it, and digest it, and trust what my gut told me I was reading. As I did my research, I began to understand there's a very small group of people that influence all the companies that we watch. So they used to call them the Big Six. But Disney just bought Fox, and Disney controls Marvel, and Disney owns Lucas Studios. So look at that giant audience right here. Say a small group of people control the narratives and the content that we all see on all the channels. It makes you feel like, oh, I have lots of choices, but you don't. Who's telling them what to put on those channels? Where does that lead?
Tonight, the FBI is on the case, and they are warning big companies in America to protect their data after a big Hollywood studio got hit by hackers and several blockbuster movies ended up online.
This is the first time the United States has accused a foreign government of a cyber attack against an American corporation.
And this interested me because I worked over at Sony quite a bit during my career, and I actually had to get LifeLock during the Sony hack. So I was curious. I was like, what was this really about? Well, the narrative put out in the public was Seth Rogen and James Franco made a movie about North Korea. And so they were mad, and so they decided to hack Sony to teach them a lesson. That was a public narrative that went out, and that's what I was like, well, that makes sense. You know, I know Seth and I know James, and they're definitely pushed the envelope of comedy, and their sense of humor is definitely their own. And I thought to myself, okay, that makes sense.
And now private emails are going public.
It's a public relations disaster.
But what I found really interesting as I examined the WikiLeaks documents was it showed that the heads of one of our biggest movie studios in America was in direct communication with very important people in our government. It didn't surprise me. I was like, okay, well, either they're friends or there's something more to it. So I had never really thought about the government influencing our content or our stories. Could they be influencing our story and our content? These were real questions that I never had asked myself. I just did the jobs. I went to work, I did my job, I did whatever was asked, and I went home. Never thought about this stuff. So I was like, I don't really know anybody that can answer these questions. And I reached out to this guy who I'd been watching online. His name was Kevin Shipp. And for those of you who don't know who Kevin Shipp is, he's a CIA whistleblower. He worked in counterintelligence, and he served in many capacities in his tenure at the CIA.
This is the big picture. An official television report to the nation from the United States Army.
It was an OSS memo, the precursor to the CIA, where they were doing a study of the use of motion pictures in America as a means of psychological warfare. So it goes all the way back to pre-1947 when U.S. intelligence was using motion pictures to alter the thinking of Americans in the United States.
The morale of our troops is high. The laughter, music, and general entertainment which comes out of a single small package like this one have helped to build that morale.
The CIA is funneling information into Hollywood. Hollywood is putting out in the movies, and the population believes it.
Taxes to bury the Axis.
This document right here is a FOIA document. Anybody in America, anybody can request this. It's Freedom of Information Act. And in the 40s, they were telling you they controlled the radio stations. They controlled most of the mainstream media. They're telling you right here that motion pictures are used as psychological warfare. Why would they stop doing it?
At no time has the CIA engaged in any political activity or any intelligence activity that was not approved at the highest level.
Alan Dulles groomed and recruited Ian Fleming, and Dulles and the CIA actually helped Fleming write his books and paint the CIA in a favorable light. And they also, Dulles helped produce Thunderball to make the CIA and agents look like honorable, cool people. The CIA actually helped him write the books and write the script for that movie. And then the president of MPAA was actually providing intelligence to the CIA as an operative in that position in Hollywood.
Mr. Fleming, in your books there's a great amount of detail. Is this detail based on personal experience? Do you make it up? Where does it come from?
Well, I can say it's 90% from personal experience, really. Of course, if I started sticking too close to the true espionage work of today, I should be in trouble with the Official Secrets Act in England, even supposing I had access to information.
There's no question about the fact that Mockingbird is real. It started out paying journalists in major media, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalists, to print fake stories that the CIA wanted in the press and fake interviews. And this was revealed in the Church Committee.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal? We do have people who submit pieces to American journals.
And of course, then the CIA destroyed the rest of the files, which is what they do. George H.W. Bush came out and finally made the statement about Mockingbird. Well, we're going to officially stop the Mockingbird program. The CIA will no longer pay journalists to write stories. From now on, the program is voluntary, which means Mockingbird continues today. When's the last time you've seen a mainstream media outlet do a serious investigative report on the actions of the CIA? There's a reason for that.
This would mean that the CIA could manipulate the news in the United States by channeling it through some foreign country. And we're looking at that very carefully.
You say that continues today?
Well, I would think probably for a reporter it would continue today, but because of all of the revelations of the period of the 1970s, it seems to me that a reporter's got to be much more circumspect in doing it now, or he runs the risk of at least being looked at with considerable disfavor by the public. I think you've got to be much more careful about it.
To push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
There is something about the way the CIA has been functioning that is casting a shadow on our historic position of freedom, and I feel we need to correct it.
Senator Moynihan proposed a bill to dismantle the CIA.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Introduced it twice. The second time was 1995. Ironically, 1 year later in 1996, the CIA established the Entertainment Liaison Office, which was specifically penetrated into Hollywood, and Chase Brandon was actually co-wrote scripts. For example, The Recruit.
We're looking for high horsepower, high energy, very competitive people who are driven by patriotism and a sense of wanting to serve a greater cause.
I am recruiting you. Would I have to kill anyone? Would you like to?
So the CIA was and is in Hollywood, was and is contributing to Hollywood productions and that manipulation.
The Recruit.
Nothing is what it seems. As I started to wake up, I never actually considered that the CIA had an office in Hollywood. And I'm like, well, I see this, I see that. And I started putting feelers out, like, does anybody else see this stuff? And not many people were awake. But the one person that I reached out to was an old colleague of mine, a friend of mine named Brad Martin. And Brad and I had similar careers. We worked our way up through the business together. And I'm like, hey, Brad, you've seen this, you've seen that? And he's like, yeah, for sure. And so that gave me strength. That gave me like, okay, well, I'm not alone in this deal. And I'm going to keep looking.
Let me just say this. Brad's one of the greatest stuntmen I've ever met. Probably the best.
I'm a very physically creative person. I've been doing action for movies for 26, 27 years. I excelled at the action aspect of it, at the physical aspect of doing the fights and doing the gymnastics and doing the falls and doing the driving. I trained really hard to become one of the top stuntmen in the business. I started becoming a fight coordinator, and then a stunt coordinator, and then an action director. Very few people have ever gotten to where I've gotten to, and I'm super proud of what I did. I mean, I had a very idealistic view of the movie business, and I've been disillusioned a few times. It feels very much like there's an agenda in every movie. I realized that it was more of a machine, and it was more of they just needed content to put out there for the masses. I stopped really watching TV. I stopped really watching movies. One of the reasons why I stopped watching movies is I got into my research and what's going on in the world right now, and all the corruptness and all of the plot twists of reality. And I started realizing that reality is 20 times more interesting than Hollywood. I mean, I was a Hollywood buff. I loved all of those movies, but now they're meaningless because I know what's going on right now actually has purpose and has a meaning, and there are consequences. And once this story is told on what's happening in the world right now, and all of the powers that be battling each other, it will be the greatest story ever told. Like, for instance, I saw something on History Channel talking about how the CIA helped Disney buy all the swampland in Florida. Well, why on earth would they do that?
His lawyers in charge of purchasing the parcels had served in military intelligence during World War II and knew how to keep a secret. And they used several different companies, none with Disney's name, to acquire the properties.
Now I go down this rabbit hole of what does the CIA have to do with Hollywood, or at least with Disney? Washington, D.C. is definitely in Hollywood. I have seen documents of the DOD and the CIA writing to the studio heads, guiding them in certain fashion. There's a lot of things that people would talk about that are conspiracy theory, but there's some things that ring true with me. It's like, oh wow, that makes a lot of sense.
Another program developed by the CIA after World War II was called Operation Paperclip. It's been depicted in many movies, including Disney's Marvel series.
It was Operation Paperclip after World War II. SHIELD recruited German scientists with strategic value.
Thought I could help their cause.
Operation Paperclip, and this is something people need to know because it has been so covered up and mocked and berated and claimed to be a conspiracy theory. And by the way, the term labeling people as conspiracy theorists was invented by the CIA to deflect any attention over the JFK assassination. They invented that word as a way to shut down any scrutiny or this critical investigation of what they were doing. So they started that whole ball rolling. In terms of Operation Paperclip, it is documented. There's absolutely no question about it. Alan Dulles, CIA director, was an associate of Heinrich Himmler of the Third Reich. So what Dulles proceeded to do when the Third Reich was brought down was he secretly brought all of the top Nazi scientists into the U.S. He falsified their files that he gave to Harry Truman, making them look like there were no war crimes. They brought these Nazi scientists into the CIA to work for the CIA, and that includes the human experiments they conducted on Jewish men, women, and children, and the psychological studies that these Nazi scientists had done. The CIA was using their expertise for these programs through Operation Paperclip, and this was Nazi, much of it occult beliefs that the CIA adopted and actually put these people on their payroll.
One of the programs that came out of Operation Paperclip was MKUltra. Now, MKUltra was a very complex program that dealt with human experiments and mind manipulation.
As this 1952 CIA memo says, the aim is controlling an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will, and even against such fundamental laws of nature as self-preservation.
In the Church Committee, MKUltra came out as an actual program of mind control using mental, physical, and sexual abuse and psychotropic drugs.
Lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD.
It was one of the first times that anybody had run into a powerful drug that was different than anything else that they knew anything about.
A decision was made at the highest levels of the CIA to do testing on unwitting Americans.
At Ravenscraig, Dr. Cameron went further with drugs and electric shock treatments than any researchers in the MKUltra project dared. His aim was to wipe the mind clean. Then he would implant new messages by forcing the patient to listen to a hypnotic repetition as many as 250,000 times. This was called psychic driving.
He would give the patient intensive electric treatment. He would attempt to implant new ideas in the mind of the patient.
Now, to a layman, it would appear that Dr. Cameron was trying to take the slate and wipe it clean, the slate being the mind. In other words, brainwashing.
Exactly, that's a very good comparison.
Brainwashing.
Yes, to that.
No. Good heavens.
You're doing fine. Just try to describe it. Oh, you don't know. You want to give yourself. You want to give yourself surgery.
How do you feel inside?
I'm having inside. Nobody explained it to me. Nobody ever asked me if I was willing to do it or anything.
They put me on sleep treatment. And they kept you asleep for 23 days. And while I was asleep, they were shocking the heck out of me with electric shocks and playing tapes.
It was really like a concentration camp.
What feel like?
I look this way.
You look that way. Nothing for you to watch here, but you're going to talk to me as we go along.
They couldn't go any further because CIA Director Richard Helms destroyed all the CIA's MK Ultra documents, and they had to rely on coached witnesses. So they were never able to dig even deeper. What they got was bad enough. It was never terminated. There's no evidence that it was ever terminated. No documents, no nothing, and not even an admission by the CIA that it's been terminated.
How do you feel?
I'm feeling better, thank you.
Feeling better? Are you sleeping well?
Yes, I'm sleeping better now.
We could disable a whole city by putting a very small amount on a water supply. After all of these years of us, those of us who are involved in looking for this secret drug, this was the only thing that began to look for the first time like it might be something like that.
So MK Ultra was one of the hardest programs for me to wrap my head around because it's a lot of subset programs. And I was really surprised that Brad Martin knew about MK Ultra.
People think that research people are crazy for talking about MK Ultra, mind control. Even if they acknowledge that existed, they go, oh, well, that ended in the 70s. That's a crock of shit.
And perhaps the world's only hope of stopping a sinister assassination plot.
The movie that I did involving that topic was Zoolander.
The fashion industry has been behind every major political assassination over the last 200 years.
I mean, at the time, I was making a comedy and I had no idea what I was involved with. But now looking back on the movie, I'm blown away at just the propaganda.
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
In a movie like Zoolander, when they're showing you that they're controlling Derek Zoolander's mind through mind control, you realize that they're trying to desensitize you and to make you think that what you're watching is fiction because it's in a comedy.
Like a mass MK Ultra now. Their purpose is to capture the minds of the people and feed them false history. The CIA is funneling information into Hollywood. Hollywood is putting out in the movies, and the population believes it.
All right, so look, here's the deal. They have been desensitizing us since we were born, and I'll give you some examples. Let's start with the big one. Let's start with words we hear all the time and never even think about. Let's start with the word entertainment. To entertain. What does that mean? To bind or hold. To bind or hold what? An audience's attention. Okay, now let's take the word Hollywood. Where does that come from? Well, Hollywood comes from the holly tree. And the ancient Druids, back in the day, used to take the holly tree, make wands to weave spells, cast spells, or channel spells. And when they needed help, they would consult the Magi's or the mediums of the day to help channel their spells to the population. We'll cut to today. What do we have in our houses? We have these black boxes. What are they called? TVs. But if you stop and you say the word television, and when you turn on that television, what do you get? What's the first thing that pops up? A list of channels. And when you turn on those channels, what's on those channels? Programming. They are programming you. They've been programming your whole life. You don't even know it. They do it with your music. They do it with your TV. They do it with your movies. They do it with your games. They have been programming us and programming you since you were little, and you don't even know it because you don't even question it.
Starting in 1900, we entered a previously unimaginable time of modern technology.